in good traffic. Rob Parker, thank you so much for joining the show today, first and foremost. I would love to kind of start off by just you telling us a little bit about the project that you're spearheading and how it kind of got started. Just give us kind of the brief story and history of it here.
Got to tell you, it's a lot of fun, Brad. We basically built a movie studio here in Georgia, and Georgia has become one of the largest centers for film and television in the world, third largest in the U.S. behind California and New York, and quickly gaining. That was 10 years ago. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. Our first film was Ant-Man. Came out of the ground very quickly, building the studio. The studio has grown dramatically and become the largest studio in North America, one of the largest in the world. And Ant-Man, Spider-Man Homecoming, Captain America, Avengers, Infinity Wars, and Endgame, and on and on and on. The Marvel Universe has been here significantly. And so we've got this amazing studio, but we're talking about a town, right? Where do people live if they're going to be in what is, in essence, rural Georgia, suburban Georgia, outside of Atlanta? And so we set out to, originally think about workforce housing, so they got a place to live. And we've really, really kind of centered in on what would cause creatives, people associated with the industry, the film industry, what would cause them to thrive and flourish? And so we went on a deep dive on what kind of living that would be. And I'm excited to tell you about it. There's a whole bunch of things that I'd love to unpack for you. But if I had to describe it, I would say we are a new urbanist, walkable community designed specifically for sustainability from an environmental standpoint, causing people to thrive and flourish. And we get people out of their cars. In fact, this whole thing is designed in a format similar to how we used to live in neighborhoods before the car became part of our lives. And I'd love to unpack that for you too.
Oh, absolutely. You know, if you know anything about this show, you know that's our favorite thing to talk about is getting folks out of cars. I'm really fascinated because as I was doing some research on your specific community and looking into the history a bit and the intent, obviously before the town even came about being this kind of film center in the United States, you know, with all of that firepower in that industry in terms of reputation and kind of social influence, all of that, for you all to kind of amongst that state very clearly that walkability is the core tenet of this development. I read an article that featured you and you talked a lot about that first and foremost as kind of the piece that you all started this all with and really have built every step of it around. Where and when did you realize that even this community of folks that are involved in film and kind of that traditional Hollywood crowd really also cares about this tenet of walkability and is looking for that in where they live?
Well, placemaking, the deeper you dive into placemaking, you recognize that the places that we fall in love with, the places that we want to go visit on the weekend are built at human scale, right? And we want to walk those communities. And the great ones, when I say human scale, they're probably 3 or 4 story buildings and no taller. They're narrow streets so that it feels like an outdoor room as you're walking down through. It's the way we used to build. And then you become, when you get outside of human scale, it becomes urban above 4 floors. The theory there is that if you can't recognize someone's face from the ground, then that building is too tall, or it's at least not, it's out of human scale. So we say about 4 stories or so. This idea, the film industry in particular, obviously we've tracked a lot of people from the West Coast, from New York, from London, all of whom would have had the walkable experience generally and probably care about sustainability, environmental sustainability. So they're wired a little bit more towards that. California folks, not nearly as much. And once they get in this environment, they're just incredibly taken with it. But the fun thing about that is that as we've focused on creatives and artists, we say creatives, artists, storytellers, and makers. So the creative class, when you start to recognize what they care about, they do care about beauty, a sense of design, a grounding to the earth. And part of this creative process, literally, we talk about forest bathing and just literally taking your shoes off and getting your toes in the dirt. there's a connectedness to the earth. And if you're a person of faith, to a higher being, instead of this connectivity that kind of inspires creativity. So I probably passed right by our primary objective, which is the theory that we're working under is that if people live better lives, they'll tell better stories. And if you think about that for a minute, we could use some better stories. The stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, the stories that we tell about others, and the world would be a much better place, I think, if we could use this medium to tell better stories. So all of that kind of centers around this idea of thriving and flourishing, human flourishing, if you will, and what causes that. We know, anybody who's spent any time studying kind of our current environment in the suburban environment knows that the suburbs is, if not a failed experiment, a very challenged one, where we have left the cities, where we've left our connectivity, our community, and our walkability, and we're all living on 1 acres, 2 acres, etc. We don't engage with our neighbors. The garage door opener is probably the worst invention ever, because we don't even have to see anybody, right? We just pull in, punch the button. And so this is very much an antidote, if you will, for part of that as well. So I'm rambling a bit, but there's so much to unpack here.
Sure. Yeah, and when I first kind of dove into this a bit more, it really got me thinking about the concept of industry towns, right? Something that, to your kind of earlier point, also used to be very much more common. And then we saw kind of a decline in that sort of setup. It seems like you all have been very intentional about making this also very multifaceted in terms of the sort of people that it attracts and the sort of industry that can be built around that film presence, so that it's not fully dependent on just one singular industry. Was that a very intentional choice? Has there been a really hand-picked selection of the sort of creatives that you want to attract to this place? Or is it very open and ambiguous in terms of what that actually means?
Well, early on, when we were describing ourselves as a town for creating, people would say, well, do I have to be a professional creative to live here? Do I have to be in the industry? And certainly you don't. We recognized pretty early that if you have just one type of person, you don't have a town, right? In fact, we joke a lot of, if everybody's a creative, who's getting it done, right? If everybody's designing it and thinking about it. So so I would say you need, for a town, you need teachers and doctors and first responders. You need this broad spectrum of different thoughts and people. We also recognize that creativity and inspiring creativity in others is valuable for everybody, right? Yeah. So that, quite frankly, we would love to inspire people to help cure cancer and to solve complex issues that don't have anything to do with film and television, but have very much to do with inspiring creativity and what's inside, and inspiring that to get out. So we think somewhere around 35-40% of the people are connected in some way to the industry, and that's broadly. You could be in catering and transportation and makeup and all different kinds of things associated with it, or you could be an actor or a producer, director, a set maker, and so I would say it's a broad mix. We have folks that come into town for a season. And then we have a number of people that live here as well. So a lot of different housing options. I'd love to talk to you about that, from the micro homes, the little tiny homes that we have, all the way up to custom homes and everything in between, including tree houses that we should talk about.
Yes, I did notice the tree houses. That did draw my attention in quite well. But yeah, the housing piece is something that I think I noticed right off the bat, for the reason of it's not typical to have that full gradient of, you all really do have from the starter kind of young apartment setup, the missing middle housing, and then the full on more custom built single family homes. How much of that came from kind of involvement in the new urbanist movement? And where were kind of the roots in the decision of, hey, we really want to make sure that we're incorporating this gradient of housing options for folks that are going to live here?
Well, Seaside and 30A, Seaside, Rosemary Beach, Alice Beach, were all an inspiration from a design perspective, from a walkability perspective. The piece that was missing from the early 1.0 versions of new urbanism, which are have its roots 40 years plus, is this walkable town center with retail, restaurants, and then the idea that we would have a commercial, a company town associated idea is new. It's even expanded for us beyond film and television, and we can talk about that into sports and live entertainment, which we can talk about. But this idea, you mentioned company town. I want to hit back. There was a time when I think from a very paternalistic kind of standpoint, a company would say, listen, I've got to take care of my people. I got to provide housing for them. I'd like them to be very focused on the work that I want them to do, and they're going to build it. And then where I'm going to build them a school, and I'm going to build them. And there was a lot of control in their lives. So I think there's a big pushback on that. For us, the difference, the evolution, we're not Hershey, Pennsylvania, making chocolate, and we're not, some of the other examples that didn't kind of survive in that mode. Ours is an industry, not a company. So you don't work for Trilith Studios when you live here. You are part of the film and television industry more broadly if you're a professional. So because of that, you are on our lot with different productions, different companies. So we're not the big, company town. But it's still the idea of people who have common interests, shared work interests, living together, mixed with other folks, really does create what I would call an authentic town. We talk about authenticity a lot. This is not, people will, especially the creative class, will see right through something that is Disney-esque or Epcot Center, I don't know if that answers your question, but it really has been about creating an authentic place that attracts all kinds of folks.
Certainly. And that also was a point that I wanted to understand from your perspective as well, is that newer build, sometimes, you've probably been in places where they tell you, hey, this is a certain type of community, but you go there and it feels kind of cookie cutter because everything was built at a similar time. And it's a challenge, I think, when we talk about building from scratch, right? This idea of taking something that wasn't there, doing more of a greenfield development. How have you all kind of tried to address that to make it feel, to your point, these people who are going to be attracted to this place, maybe more than anyone else, are going to see right through you feeding them kind of a storyline that doesn't match up in terms of vibe and feel? How have you all approached the kind of science really behind that equation and that feel that folks will get when they're living and visiting?
Well, I'll start with philosophically and the why, this telling better stories and living better lives. So it comes from a really good place that we want to create something authentic. We also want to make it fun. We wanted it to be a bit of a backlot opportunity where you could film here different scenes and settings, which we could quickly devolve into, as I described, Epcot Center. So I'm not talking about building where you're walking from Switzerland to Sweden and going through a passageway and that kind of stuff. So how do you do that in an authentic way? And to your point, do it in what has been really fast. I mean, this whole thing is the town is about 7 years old. And so in that time period, how do you do it fast, brand new, but make it not feel like it is? So it has been an intentional approach to create what I would call patina, to create an environment where you're using Core 10 and allowing it to rust. Where we, on the brick on our office building, is 110 years old off of an old mill in Valley, Alabama, where we took the brick off brick by brick and remortared it in the old style, and so it looks like an old building. And then our multifamily, which is the 3 stories above ground floor retail, each of those storefronts being individual and different, allowing and actually kind of requiring those folks to go to the most creative levels that they could to paint the brick, to do murals, to create an environment. Everybody's awning is different, so it doesn't look like that it came up all at one time. It sounds funny, but we kind of let the vines grow on the buildings, but we also let the moss grow. We don't power wash that off, and if the paint's a little bit off of the sidewalk, it creates a patina. The materiality too, we use cobblestones and brick pavers and permeable surfaces and a whole bunch of things. So as you walk through, you don't feel like it came up all at one time. Yeah. So I would say it was a very intentional approach to doing that. I'm going to also say it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's really not easy to make something new look old, which is so funny because if we have old things, we want them to be new. but
Right.
it's been an interesting journey of intentionality, I would say.
Sure. So what have some of those challenges, or at least choices rather, that you all have made added in terms of maybe cost, and thus how have you been able to maintain some semblance of affordability as you've made those really intentional choices that for one reason or other communities around the country haven't been able to make or aren't making, as is previously and currently constituted as the norm?
Well, anybody who visit will recognize right away that the amenities, the parks, the landscaping, the sense of beauty that's here is remarkable, and there's a cost associated with that. We have done probably our biggest challenge is attainability. We're careful with the word affordability because people have these ideas of affordable housing that aren't positive. For us,
Sure.
we want people to be able to live here and to be able to attain that. Um, and so that and it's an age-old problem that if you create something beautiful and people fall in love with it, then supply will get low, demand will be high, and prices will go up. So it is our biggest challenge. Is we talk about that working artist, that early career artist, but has been referred to as a starving artist. That we try to avoid that term. But how do you make sure that they can live here? And I would say that we're in the same spot that they are in Hollywood, which is they probably need to get a roommate. They probably need to think about their housing a little bit differently. And then I would say we also find ourselves much more attractive to a mid-career rather than
Okay.
those just starting out. So we are focused on the education side of it. We've got some dorms that are being planned and programming for the next generation of creators, artists, storytellers, and makers through something we call the Trilith Institute. So our foundation's focused on it. The Trilith Institute is focused on that next generation. But we are all struggling with attainability. And I guess I would say to your audience, who recognize this, obviously interest rates are a huge challenge. The escalation in costs, it's 40% more to build than it was pre-pandemic. So it's very real. Our builders are not making more money. The housing's just 30 to 40% more. So it's a challenge. And quite frankly, if I were to be a little more philosophical about it, the system's a bit broken in regard to that. I think there was if you go back to how did we get here, where housing became our investment vehicle instead of our shelter. There was a time, pre-World War II, where you built a house that you could afford. You didn't get a 30-year mortgage. You got your materials together and you built a one-bedroom house, and then you added on a second bedroom. And when you got more wood and more materials, you built some more. But the foundation of this industry is a little bit challenging in that it's all based on the 30-year mortgage, and it's all based on our prices going up and our values going up. So imagine all of a sudden if we were to drive prices down and home values down. Imagine what that would do, because we all want prices to come down until we really think about it. Do I want my home value to go down? So I'm off topic just a bit, but I think this idea that it is more than shelter, it's become, our investment vehicle, something we're going to have to think about and address.
Yeah, for sure. No, cities like Austin right now that have made really promising changes to, minimum lot size and things like that have really helped to contribute to lowering their costs there. But then some folks think that that's a, downfall of a place, whereas a lot of us are celebrating it as a good thing. So to your point, half the country sees it as a financial instrument, other half sees it as, shelter. It creates a lot of interesting conversations, which I'm sure you've been right smack dab in the middle of quite often. So
well, I'm glad you mentioned Austin. Austin was a huge inspiration for us. Part of I would say the grittiness and when we think about South by Southwest and music and technology and film and television, and then the dynamic on the street. So part of this is not, part of the reason Trilith doesn't feel plastic is it was very intentionally designed to feel a bit grittier, a little bit funkier, a little bit weirder, and so that's been a part of it. But the other side of it, I'm glad you mentioned, is that we are doing accessory dwelling units, guest houses. We do have for the first time the ability to have a rental property on a single family lot, which is not typical. And then of course the micro homes become. By the way, you can only get so small before it's just hard to live. But we're down to our smallest are 375 feet. But we got a lot in the 550 to 600 square feet that people are living in.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I was about to ask about sizing a little bit. So that makes a lot of sense. How much then has there been, you mentioned Austin. I think about this a lot, where the balance between city and state and kind of the different governmental influences, a lot of the progress that we're seeing, whether it be in a place like Austin, whether it be in a place like Cul-de-sac in Tempe, Arizona, which is where I lived this spring for some time, all these places where you kind of have blue city, red state often creates an interesting balance where you'll have, less building regulations, but maybe some more progressive energy around developing some of these projects that tend to kind of get more support on that side. How has your particular positioning and where you are in Georgia been affected by that, if at all? How has it maybe helped or presented unique challenges?
Well, I would say for us, because we are part of the film industry, and a lot of our folks are from the West Coast, and that the blue-red kind of conversation has been, one that we've quite frankly stayed away from directly, sure. Right? And everybody is welcome. And then from a policy standpoint, we there was concern that that we might move from blue to red, red to blue, et cetera. And we have really kind of had open arms and to anybody and everybody. As it relates to regulations, for us, the biggest dynamic has been the local, having strong local municipal relationships. So we're part of a city of Fayetteville, Georgia, and I think there's more impact on what we're doing here, but with the city council, with the mayor, with the people who are helping us overcome the zoning challenges, because it's illegal to do what it is that we do in most of what we're doing right here. 10-foot separations in our homes, 0 lot lines, shared courtyards, all kinds of things that really you can't do in most jurisdictions. So the local municipality being willing to take a risk. We did ours under what's called PCD zoning, planned community development. They allowed us to basically draft a development agreement and negotiate a lot of things, smaller footprint homes. It was at one time, well, actually anywhere in the city, you can't build less than 1,000 square feet except at Trilith. It was stepping out of some of our the regulations, but I would say state and federal haven't been nearly as much a focus for us as it has been our local relationship.
Interesting. So if you were, speaking to other developers who maybe are looking to a smaller scale of what you're doing that's in a little bit of a different vein, how would you suggest that they approach that relationship with the municipality? I think this is something that a lot of people can't fully visualize of, okay, so there are these laws on the book, but in theory, we can do things to get a variance or to work around them or to work with the city to kind of achieve a common goal. What would you kind of say might be a couple things that you would suggest in terms of starting places for a smaller scale developer who's looking to get in a similar type of situation?
I would say first, it's developing relational capital. All right, you have to be known, and although you may not have done a project like this, they have to trust you, and so there is. For me, I joined the chamber board, became chairman of the chamber, worked with the development authority, invested in the community, got involved in the nonprofit space, and so I'm a known entity here, and our other team members are. Our chief visionary is very much a known entity and a trusted person, our primary investor and chief visionary. But then, to me, you have to show examples of how it works in other places, and that's why we probably do more tours here than I do anything else. It's just nonstop because people want to come and see it, take pictures of it, and then go back and say, hey, we'd like to do this too. We were very strategic about taking our city council and our city planners to Seaside, Rosemary Beach, so Alice Beach. We did a day there. We actually helped introduce them to the Congress for New Urbanism, and so they spent 4 days talking to other folks who are talking about similar things. And then I lead a group called the National Town Builders Association. And so exposure to people that are doing it different and doing it better. And I'm not going to suggest in any way that it's easy. It is kind of grassroots, guerrilla marketing, kind of relational development. But if I'm starting again, a year from now doing a project like this, boy, I would take all the lessons from those that have been successful, package it, and then go sell. Yeah.
Mm. So how helpful in that sort of regard has the being part of that Congress been? I know you were in Cincinnati, correct, a couple of weeks ago for the Congress.
Yes.
I unfortunately couldn't make it this year, was moving across the country, but I would love to hear, like, as an example for folks to understand, when you go to an event like that with others who are, again, doing very different things, but also very similar things in terms of a lot of these principles and ideas, what is the value of getting in a room and kind of valuing that community over competition and helping each other navigate those challenges, to understand that we're all trying to build similar types of neighborhoods in very different environments throughout the United States?
Yeah. First of all, I have never sensed in the 8 years that I've been kind of deep diving in this, a sense of competition. There is so much work that needs to be done and so many opportunities that I just don't see that. And it may be in some small environments you might have a little bit. So, so CNU, Congress for New Urbanism, 40-year-old organization, absolutely committed to 27 principles that are in the original charter, centered around all the things that you care about and I care about as it relates to human flourishing and walkability and sustainability, et cetera. Those people are passionate. It's mission driven. They want to make the world a better place. They want people to live better lives. And so the sharing is off the chain. And I'm flying to Winter Haven, Florida, this evening for a day tomorrow with a group who I'm just helping out. We're just engaging because they want to build something special and something good. So there's a lot of that kind of spirit there. I think you also sit in and find out, you realize what a common experience we're all having, how unaffordable or unattainable this is, about the missing middle, about truly understanding how to solve that missing middle problem, what greenfield development and its challenges are, what infill is like, and reclaiming our cities and restoring our cities. So I would say it's camaraderie, it's information, it's seeing what can be done, going back inspired to try again. If you failed, you learn things like, I'll be very practical. You learn that probably the most powerful person in a city government is the fire chief, and which is something I never would have known 8 years ago. And if the fire chief says that you can't build that because it's, he or she believes that's dangerous, and even if it's not fully in the fire code, but he or she is willing to say to city council, hey, if you override me, then you're responsible for all the deaths that are going to occur when this building burns down and it takes down the 10 houses next to it, whatever it is, right? So I don't mean to be negative, but what I'm saying is that you learn that, wow, I really need to build a relationship with the fire department and not only with the other stakeholders, because public safety is a really big deal. So anyway, you learn, you build relationships, and you go back inspired to do something bigger and better. At least that's been my experience.
I love that advice. So I want to talk a bit about the physical positioning of your site in accordance to some other things. So sure. I mentioned I was at Cul-de-sac this spring. That's a 17-acre site out there in Tempe, Arizona. You all are on 235 acres. So that's quite a large, massive land to begin with. obviously that's really hard to find super close to a downtown area. I know you all had the studio that was kind of your, anchor point there. How intentional and thoughtful and planning ahead are you being about connecting with the larger fabric of Atlanta in the metropolitan area, whether that be via transit or just thinking out how folks maybe might want to live in your community, but also have an involvement in that obviously internationally bustling metro area and downtown that's a bit a ways from you all?
But we have a huge advantage of being about 20 minutes from the largest and busiest airport in the world. So for us, you also don't have to go through Atlanta to get there. We are on the airport side of Atlanta. So that's a huge advantage for people coming in to us and getting to us. The connectivity piece of it, though, has become really important for us with the towns around us. Peachtree City, which is a planned community adjacent to us, and I say a planned community, very progressive planned community related to golf cart paths and connectivity. They have 100 miles of golf cart paths that connect every neighborhood. Every single neighborhood in Peachtree City is connected. So to be connected by path and trail, which is another thing we should talk about, is how do you connect to the other things around you so that you're not an island. And if you're going to keep people out of their cars, then they got to have a place to take their bikes and their one wheels and the e-bikes are just a huge evolution for us in that as well. So for us, it's connectivity to the adjacents. And then we do not have mass transit here down to our area. But if we can get you to the airport, then you can get to anywhere in the Atlanta area through MARTA. And so for us, it's about focusing on getting people there. It's not nearly as much of an issue now that you can Uber or Lyft pretty much anytime you want to the airport. In terms of, we're really fired up, having been to Bentonville, Arkansas, like 3 different times to kind of see what they've done with their path system and trail system, where they've got 45 miles of connectivity with all of their cities there in Northwest Arkansas. It's pretty remarkable. And so in a similar way, we're trying to do some of those same things. Getting a path that is wide enough for people to actually use. If you've got topography like we have, e-bikes are just the equalizer for that. You can commute and you can ride and don't need a shower if you're riding an e-bike versus a regular bike. And then trails. So we differentiate between paths and trails, and paths to try to get people connected, and trails that literally get them off into the woods. So I would say connecting to Atlanta is important to us, but connecting to our region is just as important.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of times on this show and just common conversation, people associate these ideas of walkability and softer density with only, metropolitan downtown regions. And it's very, very crucial, I think, to also continue to point out suburban examples, rural examples, which obviously you all are doing a phenomenal job of, it seems like. Has that been also, in terms of, I think now, I guess my question pertains to kind of big picture outside of just your specific development. How big of an impetus are you all putting on using this as a model of some kind to help? I know we had mentioned earlier the sharing of ideas at the Congress and things like that, but just in general to the general public and to, again, any developer who even right now might not even be thinking about developing these sorts of neighborhoods. Do you see your role as kind of a group that is trying to set a model for suburban development of this kind in cities and states far and wide throughout the U.S.?
Yeah, we're not a traditional developer in that we did not set out. This isn't the first of 20 that we're going to do over the next 10 years kind of thing. This is a legacy play for us. It's multi-generational for our founder. So it will be passed on to his kids and grandkids and beyond. So we care about that deeply. So it is a bit of a university setting. We were very inspired by the Seaside Institute and how they have used the Seaside platform to talk about these important issues of placemaking. And so we've established some of that groundwork, which is part of why we have a foundation early in our development. For us, the greatest thing the greatest compliment you could ever do is to copy what we're doing. And so we share it 100% wide open. One of the interesting things that we've had to do is to make sure people understand that even though it's a legacy play and we don't have to sell and be out in 5 years with a certain rate of return, it still has to be profitable and sustainable, or developers can't and won't do it. We've been studying, in fact, Urban 3 is a group that does a very specific study on density and land value and value per acre based on the kind of development that we're doing. And it is off the chain return for cities, for municipalities, for individuals. And our value per acre, is 5 to 8 times the value per acre of anything around us, and in many cases much more. And so I guess my message to developers is while there may require a little more patient capital, there's a huge return potential, and it's the right thing to do. It's a better way to live. We talk about that. So imagine doing this, making money, maybe having to hang on a little bit longer before you start to exit, but leaving behind something that the built environment, people are going to absolutely see it built and judge what it is. Imagine doing something that you could feel very proud of as people look at what it is that you've created and make money. So
best of both worlds.
Yeah, it really is. And in most cases, those are not those thoughts are diametrically opposed.
Sure. Yeah, no, and we're big Urban 3 fans around here, so that's awesome to hear that you all have made that kind of a big piece of data collection, and also just a good tool to judge as a metric for how successful this can be for a large group of constituency members, and not just one developer or one subset of the community. Right. I think it's very helpful to show all that impact. So I wanted to ask, we mentioned earlier cars a little bit, and I wanted to save this towards the end because this is a big piece of most of this show and most of the conversations that are in and around it. You all obviously have cars in and around your site, but as you mentioned, there's a lot of intentionality about where they go, where they're allowed to go, where they're allowed to park. How is that kind of set up for your site by and large? Are we having most homes have parking right on site? Is there more of a common parking area that's separated from the living spaces? How does it kind of shape out in a really physical sense?
Well, I'll talk philosophically first. One, we know that the car is going to be part of our lives, so we're not, it's not just a walkable, town with. Although I'm really interested in some of these models where they are doing that. But so for us, one of them is that we hide our cars. So with our multifamily, our decks are internal. We have liner buildings around. We only have one parking area out here that's not. That's open and feels more suburban, and we don't like it at all. And that's going to get solved when we put a parking deck. So we do a parking deck on the interior, liner buildings around the outside, so the car goes on the inside. With that said, there is a role for the automobile on the street in a walkable environment. We tend to feel a lot safer if we're walking in that outdoor room that I described, and we've got a building on one side, and we've got parallel parking on the street. And that quite frankly, that metal between you and the passing traffic is an important part of that. So we don't have pull-in parking. We try to avoid pull-in parking, and we want parallel parking. Street trees and all the things that go with a complete street to make it a good experience. But parallel parking in front of your retail and that kind of thing becomes, to me, still important. When you move into the residential, part of the beauty of the town architecture is that we're on an alley system. And so what you're seeing when you see a home, you don't see any garage doors. There's no snout houses. And so you're seeing the beautiful architecture on 3 sides, and then it's alley fed. So that's back a house, and that's where the trash cans go, and that's where kids ride their bikes, and just like in a city. So that's incredibly helpful. People are either parking in their homes, under their homes, in the garage, or they're parking in a courtyard. And we have, gosh, we have probably 40% of our homes that have no garages at all. Um, it's amazing how this generation, this next generation, does understand that the car is designed to sit outdoors. It's okay. It can sit outside. And so we talk about the fact that our cars here in the United States live better than most people do in the rest of the world. And so if you once you recognize that, you realize, no, that's probably not a great use of materiality and all the things that go with it. So I'd say fewer garages. And then because of the walkability, you talked about the 235 acres. That is the size of a walkable community where everything could be within a 10-minute walk. So that 10-minute city is real. So even if you're out at the outer edges, you're still 10 minutes walk to the town center. So just not having to have a second car is a really, really big deal. We got a lot of folks who came from 2 and 3 car families that do 1 car in Trilith. So I think all of those kind of contribute.
Nice. That is like my perfect vision, not to try to, get people to all eliminate all of them. I mean, I would love to in a perfect world, but it's really tough to convince an entire country that is so ingrained in a lifestyle. But if we can get everyone to go 1 less car than they have right now, I think that's a doable initiative. And it sounds like something that you all have done successfully. So that last bit right there, that makes me so happy to hear.
Hey, Brad, let me just add to this then. You probably know some of these studies that, in a traditional suburban neighborhood, people will drive about 70 trips a week, right?
Yeah.
Because of how our uses are so separated. And we'll go to school, we'll drop the kids at school, then we'll go to the gym and we'll go to the grocery store and on and on and on. And in a neighborhood like Trilith, you're going to do about 7 trips a week instead of 70. And just imagine what that does, the ripple effect of that. That is where our traffic, people think it's all commuting to work. It's not. It's all the other movement that we do. So by co-locating, by working in the same place, by having most of your uses met by walking, it'll make a huge difference.
Yeah, certainly. I think only 15% of car trips are commuting, and then the majority of them are going to buy things. So it sounds pretty novel, but if you put things that people buy close to their homes, you solve a large part of the problem right there. So that's music to my ears. Super cool to hear. So Rob, the last question that we ask everyone that comes on the show, out of everywhere you've lived, all the jobs you've done, whether it could be kid, teenage, college, whenever it was, what's the best and favorite commute that you've ever had?
Well, by far, living here at Trilith has been the absolute best commute I've ever had. I'm going to put number 2. We lived in Seattle, and Seattle was just incredible. And I lived on the east side in Bellevue and drove across Lake Washington, where you could see Mount Rainier off the south end and the Seattle skyline. And it was a floating bridge that we drove across on. So I have to say that if I was going to be in a car, being in the Pacific Northwest with mountains in the back, Cascades in the background, and across the water was probably my most enjoyable time in a car. But not having to get in a car at all here at Trilith has been by far the best.
I love those two in very different ways, and they're both very beautiful. So, well, Rob, thank you so much for taking the time today and for coming on and chatting about Trilith and about your work and where you all are at right now and where you're headed. If folks want to learn more, where can they do that at? And also, how could they maybe go about coming on site even to come and check out your spaces?
Yeah, so we're just south of the airport in Atlanta, easy to get to. Trilith is actually Trilith, 3 stones, Trilith. So if you just go to trilith.com, you'll find the studio, the town, the foundation, the institute. You can figure out how to buy a house, how to rent a place, how to come to a great steakhouse, great Mexican food, etc. So yeah, trilith.com. Come see us. And if you are an aspiring developer or you're in the middle of a project, you're interested in something like this, I'm just Rob at trilith.com. Shoot me a note. We host people all the time. We actually have something called the Trilith Experience where you can ride a trolley and you can see the town and the studio and get an introduction, but we'll tour you directly and talk to you about it. We'd love to see it replicated.
Awesome. We'll link all that below, and I got to get on site too, so we can do another in-person episode and walk around a bit as well. So
let's do it. We'll get some video so we can share with people.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, Rob, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.